When you were a kid and you would go to McDonald's or wherever they had fountain drinks, would you go all the way down the line getting a little bit of each type of soda all in your cup? I did that because I thought that I liked flavor, so if I have all the flavors at once, it can only get better, right? But then as I got older, I found the value in self-restraint, and I realized that the couple of flavors in each soda complemented each other in a way that made the experience better by just having one brand of soda. This comic was made by a man who probably still puts every flavor of soda in the same cup. Howdy, I'm Kurt Williams, and today we're looking at Faceless and the Family by Matt Lesniewski. I've got the first 3 issues here, and the final issue is scheduled to come out next month, and I know I should have probably waited until the full series was out to review it, but I just had to get this off my chest. Because Matt Lesniewski is an Eisner Award-nominated artist. His work on his short story, The Freak, was really well received, and I haven't been able to find that to read it, but I did manage to read his short series, Static, and that was fine. If you're not familiar with Lesniewski, he has this art style that is just crazy. We're talking max bananas here. Everything is exhaustively rendered. He's got his own laws of physics that he follows. The stylistic liberties that he takes with character designs are just insane. And whether you like it or not, his style is immediately recognizable, and that is a good thing to be for an artist. So this short series is creator-owned. He did everything himself, and then he crowdfunded it so that he could print it, which, hey, that's what this channel is for, promoting this kind of thing, an artist who's getting out there and getting it done and making art no matter what. And some of the best comics out there were written and drawn by the same person, and the end product is that much more cohesive because of their vision being so unified. But that's not always the case. Sometimes a really good writer will try to draw their own comic and it just doesn't work out. An example of which, in my opinion, is Brat Pack by Rick Veitch. Really great writing, really hard to look at art. Like, yeah, you might have had the opportunity to execute your vision exactly as you wanted to, but were you really capable of it? And sometimes you have an artist who's really good at portraying scenes as they're written, but can't really write the scenes themselves. And this is one of those series. Lesniewski is an instantly iconic artist, but has some pretty underdeveloped scripting skills. Faceless and the Family is about this guy who's been wearing a mask for 10 years because he's worried that the gang he tried to escape from is going to kill him and his family if they ever find him. So in this series, he decides that he's done wearing the mask, he finds a little bit of money, and he's gonna go and get reconstructive facial surgery so that he can go back to living a normal life without wearing this giant frickin' mask. And along the way, he meets a few friends who are also misfits, and they travel together, and it has very D&D vibes to it. Now, if you ask Matt Lesniewski, this story is about a bunch of outcasts finding family together, and that's kind of the entirety of the idea of the story to him. But considering that's the most important aspect of the story, it's written pretty poorly. These characters meet each other entirely by chance, and the amount of time it takes for them to bare their soul to each other is astonishingly short. Like, this big guy just met the main character, and they've discovered this house as they're running from some explosive wart thing that I don't really want to talk about. And within a few seconds, out of nowhere, he's talking about how he always thought he would die young. The complete lack of social awareness is astounding. That is not a natural progression for a normal conversation. And then the next character we meet immediately bares her soul and gets way too personal way too fast. And then the next character we meet gets way too personal way too fast. And they just all take it in stride, and suddenly they're family even though they just met each other today. And I don't know if there was some kind of like trauma bonding, I guess it would make sense, but there really isn't any good reason for trauma bonding here. So my point is, the dialogue is really forced. It does not feel smooth. It does not flow. It's incredibly choppy, and it just doesn't feel realistic. Ugh, especially when a character tries to like depart some wisdom on the other characters, and the wisdom is so two-dimensional and just not good wisdom. It's like a middle schooler trying to share all the valuable life lessons they've accrued over their long life to some like 4th grader. And this frickin' guy right here has some of the worst lines in the whole story. Like on the first page of issue 2 where he says, "I'll get you into the city, you're just gonna have to pay me for it." And then the main character says, "We don't have any money, but I just want to get my surgery," and the guy immediately changes his mind for no good reason. And later we do find out that that guy wants to just kidnap this girl they're traveling with, but do we have a moment where he realizes that this girl is with them and he'll have the opportunity to kidnap them? No! It seems like he already knew that she was there, and that's the only reason he wanted to get them into the city in the first first place, so why did he even bother asking for money? And then, when the guy who's supposed to be old and wise questions him for not wanting to charge after specifically wanting to charge, he says, "I get that it might seem odd, but I do this for folks all the time. It's my side gig. I've heard there are others that do it too." Not a single period in there, by the way, just one pointlessly long sentence. He continues and says, "The guards don't make it easy, so naturally there are those of us who saw it as a business opportunity, you know?" And here's why I don't like this. Everybody in this story speaks with the same vocabulary and the same sentence structure that a regular 20-year-old dude might have. This is a story about a bunch of people living on a planet that is a giant hand. Look at it, it's a giant hand with fingers and everything. Everybody who lives there has these crazy outfits. It's a totally different environment than the one that we're used to. You're telling me that nobody there has their own specific accent or their own pacing to the way they speak or a different way of explaining ideas than everybody else? Like, listen, I'm a big fan of Monty Python and movies like Life of Brian, where they put basically British people from the 60s in old-timey Mesopotamia or whatever. I like those movies. I think they're hilarious. But having every single character in this fantasy world speak like a middle schooler who watches a ton of anime in the American Midwest is lame! So anyway, the dialogue is bad. I think the premise that we started with, where he wants to get surgery so that he can blend in better and not get his family in trouble, is not that bad. But man, there are so many missed opportunities for this story to be told well. So what I'm saying is basically Matt Lesniewski is not really a strong writer. And if you're watching this, Matt, I'm sorry. Maybe other people like it more than I do. It's just really not my cup of tea. But he is one of the few modern comic artists who are doing something totally their own. I tried to think of other comic artists that I could compare this to, but I'm really not seeing any strong influences from anybody else in these pages. Like, yeah, Sam Keith is another artist who has really exaggerated anatomy, but it's not exaggerated in this way. This is totally fresh. And yeah, he's not the first artist to make 3D sound effects an actual physical object in the story, because Will Eisner was doing that like 80 years ago, but not with this same cartoonish flavor to it. One of the strengths of his style is that he just does detail upon detail upon detail, which is kind of what I was getting at with the whole lack of self-restraint thing earlier. He doesn't really know when to stop putting in detail, but it is admirable to see an artist spend so much time rendering each panel. It's clearly a labor of love. He really cares about making each panel as good as he can make it. Not every artist out there wants to spend as much time doing all this cross-hatching or all this pointillism to show the texture as in-depth as he's doing it here. John Romita Jr. comes to mind. But Lesniewski's biggest strength, the detail of his art, is also his biggest weakness. Because when you put so much detail into every single thing on your panel, you lose a lot of clarity. There were lots of times throughout this series where I had to stop and go, wait, what just happened? Because there's so much going on and everything is rendered so in-depth that it all just blends together. And I've heard Lesniewski complain about other artists just wanting to pump out comics, get quantity over quality, and just get it done fast so they avoid doing all these extra lines that could add to their work. But great comic creators, especially artists, will tell you that your main priority when drawing a comic is clarity. Get the idea across as quickly and as efficiently as you can so that the reader can just get immersed in the story. And I've also heard Lesniewski talk about how he doesn't understand why an artist would try to get each line done once with some calligraphy-inspired line, because that's like rushing through it, according to him. But it's these masterful strokes of the pen that very specifically control line weight and line direction that give objects form in comics, that make them really pop off the page. In contrast, Lesniewski will use the same skinny pen for everything he inks, and he'll just go over a line multiple times if he wants that line to be thicker. But that's how you end up with these scratchy, notebook sketch looking lines that don't really convey any depth, they don't convey any form, they just look like somebody doodling. And it's good doodles, but it's still doodles. In his comic series Static, and from what I could see of The Freak, when he is simplified, his art is a lot easier to look at, and even though things are detailed in kind of an ugly way, it's still a very cohesive style, and it's easy to process. So he just went way overboard with the detail on this, and it ended up being just kind of a hard to look at mess. Now, that's not entirely his fault. Because of who he crowdfunded with, the printing that he got is really not as high definition as it should be. So when it was printed, we lost a lot of clarity of detail. And that's not his fault, that's the printer's fault. If this was my comic and I had spent hours hours and hours and hours, probably months, making each of these issues just to see them printed in a way that makes me look like a trashy artist, I'd be devastated. It's really low quality printing, and it's kind of unclear how much that contributes to the poor composition of the series. So to wrap all that up, we have this very ambitious project by one guy who's doing everything, and that is admirable. His strength is this very iconic style he has, but he goes way too far into the weeds of detail, and the composition suffers for it. The plot is okay, but the dialogue is so poor that I just can't bring myself to care about any of these characters, and I'm really not interested in buying the last issue because I just don't care what happens to them. I just don't care about them. It could have been really good. I think it could have been really good. And I don't want to be a jerk here. I want to support and encourage artists. I want to give them the opportunity to further their craft by giving them people who will buy what they make. But this is not very good. So I'm going to give Faceless and the Family, at least so far, a 5 out of 10. It's just, a good idea, maybe that's written really poorly and it's just hard to get through. I am excited to see Lesniewski develop his style and come into his own as an artist because I think he's got tons of potential. He could very easily become an iconic artist that we remember for years and years to come. And not everything that people do is gonna be their best work ever, so let's be patient and see what he does next because he's probably gonna do great things. So that's my rating for Faceless and the Family, 5 out of 10. Did you read it? What do you think?